protecting our kids as best as we can, and also understanding the role that they play in this really historical family.
Whispers that once lived only in tabloids and late-night forums erupted into global shock today after Buckingham Palace released a statement no one believed would ever come. For years, speculation swirled around Archie and Lilibet, questions the palace firmly ignored, families avoided, and insiders dared not touch. But now, after years of silence, the truth has finally been pushed into the light. Reporters froze, royal watchers gasped, even seasoned commentators were stunned. What did the palace uncover?
They would not respond to that kind of questioning. They would have ignored it.
And why reveal the children's true identity now of all times? The silence that hid a storm. For decades, Buckingham Palace acted like a grand, ancient fortress sealed from the world. Its walls thick, its windows shut, its secrets guarded with military precision. Nothing leaked out, nothing was explained, and nothing ever seemed to shake the silence of the royal institution. Even as the world buzzed with interviews, documentaries, emotional confessions, and explosive claims from Harry and Meghan, the palace kept its face still. No reactions, no clarifications, no emotion. To millions watching, this silence looked cold, almost heartless. It felt as though the monarchy simply didn't care. But what the world assumed was indifference was something far more complicated and far more unsettling. Behind the grand walls and polished floors, whispers had already begun long before the public sensed that anything was wrong. Hidden deep within the palace offices, a set of documents had been quietly written. These weren't draft notes or suggestions waiting for approval. These were final instructions, firm, deliberate, and stamped with the kind of authority only the monarchy can command. And these instructions were not about royal events, charities, or ceremonies. They were about two innocent children, Archie and Lilibet. Children who never asked for a title, never sought fame, and never imagined they would one day sit at the center of a global storm. Those who had the rare privilege of seeing the documents said the message inside was shockingly blunt, almost cold. There was no gentle language, no soft landing, no room left for interpretation. Archie and Lilibet's connection to royal identity was finished, not postponed, not pending review, not awaiting further discussion, completely erased. In a single stroke, their path to royal recognition was shut down, and the future the world once assumed they would inherit vanished quietly on paper. And suddenly, the palace's long, unbroken silence made perfect sense. All those months when Harry and Meghan spoke their truth, when reporters analyzed every gesture, when the world argued about racism, protocol, and power, the monarchy was not ignoring them. They were simply waiting for something stronger than public pressure, stronger than TV interviews, stronger than emotion. They were waiting for the rule book, an old, strict, unforgiving document that has shaped royal identity for over 100 years, a document so powerful that even kings and queens cannot simply rewrite it at will. This rule book would determine once and for all where Archie and Lilibet stood in the royal hierarchy. The monarchy's strict, irreversible decisions trace back to a framework established in the early 20th century, long before Harry or Meghan entered the picture. Created during a time of war, political upheaval, and European instability, the decree aimed to safeguard the crown from threats, whether political, familial, or societal, that could weaken the institution. It laid down clear rules defining who could be considered royal, who could hold titles, who could inherit status, and who would remain outside the royal circle. This framework became the foundation of royal identity, prioritizing bloodline, proximity to the throne, and the reigning monarch's authority above all else. Emotional ties, popularity, or public opinion were irrelevant. The rules allowed no exceptions or loopholes. In essence, the monarchy's harsh actions today reflect a century-old strategy designed to protect the institution, maintain continuity, and ensure that decisions about royal status remain absolute, unyielding, and enduring. Today, more than a century later, that same rule book still stands like a stone wall, immovable, untouched, and sacred to the institution. So when Harry and Meghan chose a life outside royal duties, when their public revelations shook the palace, and when their relationship with the crown fractured, the monarchy didn't react impulsively. It simply returned to the rule book. The old law spoke clearly, and the decision regarding Archie and Lilibet followed its rigid logic. No matter how much the world changed, the rules had not. And so, in silent offices behind gilded doors, the future of two young children was sealed by a document older than their grandparents, a document created in a time of fear, upheld in a time of turmoil, and now used to determine who is truly royal and who is not. What says the document? When was it sealed? How does it define the future of the two young children? Let's delve into the details of the old document, the rule book that outlived century. The year was 1917, a time when the world felt as if it were collapsing in on itself. Europe was burning. Empires that had ruled for centuries were suddenly shaking, stumbling, and falling like giants struck by an invisible force. Monarchs were fleeing their palaces, revolutions were sweeping through nations, and the old order that once felt unbreakable was cracking apart. In the midst of this global chaos, King George V watched the storm with a mixture of fear and determination. He understood that the British monarchy, strong as it seemed, was not immune to the same winds pulling other thrones to the ground. What frightened him most was not just political enemies or rebels, but something far subtler: confusion. Confusion he knew could be deadly. At a time when impostors could claim royal blood, when propaganda could create false heirs, and when enemies of the crown could manipulate public opinion, even a hint of uncertainty about who belonged to the royal family could cause real damage. For centuries, royal identity had been shaped by tradition and custom, by ceremonies and expectations. But tradition alone could not protect the crown in an age when misinformation traveled faster than truth. So George V made a choice that would change the British royal family forever. He would take something that had lived only in ritual and history and turn it into law. It was a bold move, one that startled even those closest to him, but he believed it was the only way to protect the monarchy from being twisted, exploited, or reshaped by outside forces. In 1917, he drafted what became known as the Letters Patent, a legal document that finally answered the question, who is truly royal? Before this moment, titles could be granted out of generosity or withheld out of preference. Distant relatives could make claims, and rumors could complicate lineage. But George V wanted absolute clarity. He wanted a system with no guessing, no opportunistic stretching of rules, and no chance for anyone to slip into the royal line through flattery or manipulation. The Letters Patent laid out strict criteria for determining royal identity. Bloodline had to be clear and legitimate, leaving no room for questionable ancestry or unexpected claims. A child's birth had to be formally acknowledged by Buckingham Palace itself, ensuring that no private announcement or casual comment could establish royal status. And, in keeping with centuries of tradition linking the crown to the Church of England, every royal child needed to be baptized officially, with the event recorded in both church and palace registers. For the next 100 years, this system held firm. Every child born into the House of Windsor entered the world under the careful guidance of these rules. Births were public, christenings were recorded, and the royal family continued without the confusion or uncertainty that had threatened it during the First World War. The structure George V created was smooth, precise, and deeply protective. It became the silent shield that guarded the identities of every prince and princess. And then came 2019. A new royal baby was born, Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor, and suddenly the old rhythm broke. Everything about his arrival felt different. His birth announcement came through unusual channels. Details that had always been made public were held back. His christening, traditionally a formal and recorded event, happened behind closed doors, with records sealed and photographs withheld. The public, the media, and even members of the extended royal circle found themselves asking questions that had rarely been asked in over a century. For the first time since King George V set his system in stone, a visible crack appeared in the smooth, carefully maintained structure of royal identity. It was subtle, but undeniable. And that crack began not with controversy or scandal, but simply with the birth of Archie, a child whose introduction to the world changed a tradition that had seemed unshakable for generations. What was remarkable about Archie's birth? How does the old document come in? What implications does Archie's birth have on his future? Let's find out. The birth of doubt. Archie's arrival in 2019 should have been one of the most straightforward events in royal history. A glowing couple, a newborn prince of the modern age, and a traditional announcement that followed decades of royal protocol. It was supposed to be a calm, predictable chapter. But hidden in the shadows of celebration, a small detail appeared in the paperwork, and that tiny detail would soon swirl into a storm of questions. The official birth certificate originally listed Meghan's full legal name, Rachel Meghan Markle. Nothing unusual, that was standard procedure. Every royal mother before her had been identified the same way, by her full legal identity, not by titles or stylized honorifics. But then something strange happened, something almost unheard of in royal administration. The document was changed, quietly, abruptly, with no official statement explaining why. Meghan's legal name was removed entirely and replaced with her royal title, Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Sussex. To the average person, it may sound insignificant. After all, she was the Duchess of Sussex. But in royal record-keeping, birth certificates are sacred. They are not supposed to shift or bend. They are not fashion accessories, polished or edited for public image. They are permanent, legal documents. And when a royal birth certificate is altered behind closed doors, without public justification, it triggers concern among the highest levels of palace officials. Meghan publicly said the palace insisted on the change. Palace aides countered, saying Meghan herself requested it. Both sides denied the other, and neither offered proof. And so, the truth, the real truth, never came out. But one thing stood firm. The credibility of Archie's official record had been shaken, and inside the monarchy, doubt is dangerous. Doubt grows. Doubt spreads. Then, not long afterwards, came the birth of Lilibet. If Archie's paperwork raised concern, Lilibet's arrival cracked open an entirely different box. Her birth was announced from California, far away from Windsor doctors, royal midwives, and every protocol that had shaped royal births for generations. There were no palace medical staff in attendance, no royal household confirmations, no ceremonial notices placed on gilded easels outside Buckingham Palace. Instead, the world received a warm, modern, thoroughly American press release. It was sweet, heartfelt, and utterly disconnected from the institution that defines royal identity. But the real shock came later. Meghan and Harry announced their daughter had been baptized in California. A simple, joyous family moment to them. But when the Church of England was asked for confirmation, they had nothing. No entry, no paperwork, no registry of a royal child's baptism. In the Church's system, it simply did not happen. For Harry and Meghan, this wasn't a crisis. They were no longer working royals. They lived their lives thousands of miles away, and they celebrated milestones in their own way. But for the palace, it was something else entirely. According to the long-standing rules of the letters patent, rules that define who can be royal and how, this was a direct violation. A missing Church of England baptism meant that a crucial piece of identity, a foundational requirement, simply didn't exist. And for the monarchy, this wasn't a tiny missing detail. This was structural. This was constitutional. This was, in the quiet language of palace insiders, potentially disqualifying. Gradually, the inconsistencies surrounding Archie and Lilibet grew like hairline fractures spreading across glass. The palace said nothing publicly. There were no accusations, no press statements, no clarifications, just silence, cold, deliberate, observant. But behind that silence, every deviation, every unrecorded ceremony, every altered document was being carefully recorded. The royal machine, slow, formal, and unbending, was taking note of each irregularity. And as the years passed, a quiet, unsettling question began to grow within the institution. What happens when royal children exist outside the rules that define what makes someone royal in the first place? The palace never answered. They didn't need to. The cracks were widening all on their own. What was Harry's response like when he learnt about the development? How can it affect his children? What did he do? Let's find out. The Crown's final answer. As the quiet cracks inside the royal family widened into deep fractures, Harry found himself standing in a place he never expected, caught between the life he chose and the legacy he thought would always be waiting for his children. Yes, he had stepped away from royal duties. Yes, he had sought a quieter existence far from palace gates and relentless headlines. But even in the midst of that separation, he never imagined that the simple act of creating distance meant the royal identity of his children would be stripped away. In his heart, he believed Archie and Lilibet were entitled to their heritage simply by blood. And so, behind closed doors, Harry did something few people know about. In the stillness of late nights, when the world was quiet and emotions could no longer be buried, he reached back toward the palace he had walked away from. Insiders say he made several calls to senior officials, conversations that were unguarded, messy, and painfully sincere. This wasn't the voice of a prince speaking from formality or privilege. This was the voice of a father. He pleaded with them. He asked repeatedly for reconsideration, urging that his children be acknowledged, protected, and recorded as part of the royal lineage. He insisted that titles were more than pomp and tradition. To him, they were markers of identity, shields of safety, threads that tied a child to a story larger than themselves. But the palace did not bend. With every call, the response remained unchanged, polite on the surface yet cold beneath it. One night, an aide delivered a message that struck Harry harder than any tabloid headline ever had. The words were sharp, stripped of sympathy, and delivered with the calm certainty of an institution that does not negotiate. This is not about emotion. This is about order, lineage, and the future of the crown. In that moment, something inside Harry broke. He realized that he wasn't just a prince who had stepped back from duty. He was becoming something far more painful. The prince whose children were quietly being written out of the only story their ancestors had ever known. Whatever doors he once walked through as a member of the royal family were being closed to Archie and Lilibet without even a whisper. After that, the palace moved with the quiet precision it is famous for. There were no public declarations, no media briefings, no grand conversations. The institution acted silently, behind curtains and in locked rooms where decisions are made without applause or protest. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was simply final. The children's names were not forgotten. Insiders say they were removed, not by accident or oversight, but deliberately, step by step, as if someone were editing a story and choosing which characters had the right to exist within it. Records shifted. Archives were adjusted. Ceremonial possibilities that once felt automatic dissolved without a trace. Protection, once considered a given, was reassessed and withdrawn. And a place in the long royal lineage, one that stretches back centuries, simply vanished. In the world of royalty, where bloodlines define destiny and history is guarded with religious devotion, to be erased is the gravest wound of all. It is a kind of quiet exile, not from a place but from a legacy. And somewhere far from the palace walls, Harry sat with the weight of that truth. He had left the institution to protect his family, but now he feared the institution had turned its back on his children. No cameras were capturing his grief, no statements announcing the separation, just a silence thick enough to swallow generations. Harry had walked away from royal life, but now, painfully, he understood. The crown had walked away from his children. Did the palace heed to Harry's plea? Did the palace agree to rethink the decision? Let's dig into the details of the crown's final message. Silence is power. For all the noise surrounding Harry, Meghan, and their children, Buckingham Palace never stepped forward to argue, never issued a correction, never offered an explanation. And it wasn't because the palace lacked the power or the information to speak. It simply didn't feel the need to. Because the monarchy has long mastered one ancient weapon, one that has carried it safely through wars, scandals, betrayals, and centuries of public judgment: silence. This silence is not clumsiness, it is not fear, it is not the inability to respond. It is a deliberate choice, carefully shaped, deeply polished, and fiercely protected. Silence, in royal hands, becomes a shield and a sword at once, a tool sharper than any press release and far more lasting than a headline. It is the crown's quiet way of saying, "We do not fight battles on your terms." While Harry and Meghan shared their story across interviews, memoirs, and documentaries, the palace stayed still, like a mountain unmoved by a storm. It did not rush into the drama. It did not compete for sympathy. It did not try to prove anything to the public. Instead, it leaned on something stronger than opinion and louder than emotion: tradition. For the monarchy, the rule book speaks louder than any human voice. Protocol becomes the judge. History becomes the jury, and time delivers the final ruling. And in this case, the verdict was clear, cold, and irreversible. The crown does not bend. not for personal feelings, not for public popularity, not even for princes who walk away. When the palace chooses to close a chapter, it does so without shouting, without anger, without drama. The person simply fades out of the royal frame, as if their role ended and the story continued without them. You are not labeled an enemy. You are not branded a traitor. You are simply removed, erased quietly, like a line rubbed out from an old manuscript. Not violently, but completely. And this is where Archie and Lilibet stand. They will grow up with comfort, freedom, and opportunities their parents fought hard to give them. They will know love from those around them, and a life far from the gold-trimmed expectations of palace walls. But the royal archives, the ancient books that record the lives, titles, and lineages of kings and queens, will turn their pages without pausing at their names. Year after year, generation after generation, those records will move forward as if nothing is missing. Because within the monarchy, absence is not an accident, it is a message delivered not through speeches or statements, but through a blank space, through the titles that never appear, the roles that are never assigned, the acknowledgments that never come. That empty space is the palace's coldest form of communication. It speaks more loudly than any royal announcement ever could. It says, "Once the crown decides, the decision stands. Silence seals the door, and some doors never open again." So while the world debates what is fair or unfair, and while supporters argue over treatment, injustice, and responsibility, the institution moves forward with the steady patience of a centuries-old machine. It does not rush, and it does not explain. It simply continues. And in that continuation lies the true power of the monarchy. A calm, calculated quietness that outlives outrage, headlines, and even families. The story of Archie and Lilibet is not about anger from the palace. It is not about revenge or punishment. It is about something far simpler and far more permanent. A choice. A choice made in rooms where tradition outweighs emotion, where protocol is thicker than blood, and where silence is the final word. And once spoken, that silent decision echoes forever. How are the children in the middle of this drama? Are they aware of the development? What are they up to in recent times? Let's find out. The Sussex family's act of kindness. In a touching reminder of what service and compassion look like, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry recently stepped away from the noise of royal drama and celebrity chatter to do something beautifully simple. Cook meals for people who struggle to get enough food. And they didn't go alone. This time, they brought along their 2 young children, Archie and Lilibet, giving them a first-hand taste of the charitable work that has shaped so much of royal tradition for generations. The family of 4 arrived at our Big Kitchen Los Angeles, OBKLA, a warm and bustling community kitchen known for bringing people together to support neighbors in need. It wasn't a staged appearance or a photo op with polished smiles. Instead, Meghan and Harry slipped into aprons, put on gloves like everyone else, and got to work. Archie and Lily, still very young, followed their parents' lead with the natural curiosity and sincerity only children can bring. Inside the kitchen, colorful vegetables covered the counters, and volunteers moved with a sense of purpose. Meghan showed Archie how to chop peppers safely, guiding his little hands as he concentrated with the seriousness of someone on an important mission. Nearby, Harry helped Lilibet roll dough into tiny round balls, each one destined to become part of a warm meal, packed into boxes for individuals and families struggling with the rising cost of living. For a few hours, The Sussexes weren't global figures, former royals, or media headlines. They were just a family helping other families, sharing kindness, labor, and laughter over cutting boards and mixing bowls. After their visit, Harry and Meghan's Archie Foundation clarified that all meals they helped prepare were donated to community organizations supporting those in need, including Los Angeles Mercy Housing, the Pico Union Project, and PATH. These groups ensured the food reached people facing homelessness and food insecurity. While the couple has focused heavily on media and commercial projects, this act highlighted that philanthropy remains central to their lives. It also reflected their intention to instill values of empathy, humility, and social responsibility in their children, demonstrating that small, hands-on acts of service carry lasting significance. In many ways, this gesture felt like a quiet echo of a more familiar royal tradition, one rooted not in pageantry, but in service. Royal watchers quickly noticed the resemblance to the late Princess Diana, whose approach to motherhood included exposing her sons to the realities of the world beyond palace gates. Diana took William and Harry to homeless shelters, hospitals, and community centers, wanting them to understand that privilege comes with responsibility. She believed that compassion should be learned early and practiced often, and those lessons stayed with Harry throughout his life. Seeing Harry now carry that legacy forward, bringing Archie and Lily into spaces where kindness is shared through simple acts like cooking, adds a layer of meaning to the moment. It shows a continuation of Diana's spirit, even as the Sussex family builds a very different life, far from the structure of the monarchy. The visit also highlighted how charity work can be grounding. Despite public scrutiny, personal challenges, and major shifts in their roles, Harry and Meghan returned to something steady and familiar, helping others quietly, without fanfare. It was a reminder that service doesn't always need a grand stage. Sometimes it looks like rolling dough, slicing vegetables, laughing with your children, and packing meals that will brighten a stranger's day. For Archie and Lilibet, the experience may someday become one of those childhood memories that shape their understanding of kindness and community. For Harry and Meghan, it was an opportunity to blend family time with purposeful action. And for the people receiving the meals, it meant nourishment, both physical and emotional, from hands that prepared the food with care. In a world where headlines often focus on conflict, controversy, and division, the Sussex family's day at OBKLA stood out for its simplicity. It was a reminder that meaningful impact begins with small acts of service, and that compassion, when shared across generations, becomes a legacy that outlives titles, roles, and royal expectations. So, what do you think about the palace's decision? How far can Harry push for his kids? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.